When we last left season 2, Tabitha had just fallen out of the lighthouse and ended up in a hospital which we now know to be Camden, Maine. Once Tabitha realizes what's going on, she does her best to escape the hospital, but that's not before looking at the elevator numbers and seeing the 13th floor, which could support the fan theory that she is in a deeper part of FROMland, further into the woods. However, I don't think that's the case because she was actually able to make a phone call to her mother to let her know that everything was okay. And this scene is actually more important than a lot of people realize, because this phone call confirms that people who enter FROMland do not pass away upon entering. They are indeed still alive while they are in FROMland, and they are straight up missing from the actual reality that they are from. And it further supports the idea that FROMland is actually in a pocket dimension. Right before Tabitha asks one of these girls to use their cell phones, you can see this girl taking a photo of her friend, and Tabitha is in the background. Now, I think this will play a bigger part in the season. You can hear from Tabitha's phone call that her mother says a detective has been looking for the Matthews family. I believe the detective looking for Tabitha and the Matthews will look for the phone that she called from and find the photo that the girl took of Tabitha to confirm that she really did appear. Now, if you're one of the many people wondering why Tabitha did not ask her mother for help or go to her mother's home or actually try to talk to the detective, that is because she knows what she knew in the hospital when the police were coming to ask her some questions. It would look suspicious if she was the only person of her family to return. Something negative might be presumed about her. Tabitha wastes no time trying to find clues and ways to help her family and friends stuck in FROMland when she ends up finding none other than the boy in white. I do think it's pretty suspicious that he would show up in the real world, but he could also be a hallucination of her mind. But he definitely led her to the church where she meets that pastor. I also want to point out that the puzzle that Ethan was working on in this episode is a puzzle of downtown Camden, Maine, where his mother is currently, and that the puzzle may have been given to him by Victor, who may be getting gifts from someone on the outside, possibly his father, who we meet in this episode. It is very clear by now that Victor knows way more than he lets on and lets the town people know. We then see Tabitha go to the church where she makes a confession to the pastor, and the pastor somehow seems to know the son that she lost is a boy, without her actually saying so. And I find that to be mighty suspicious for some reason. If you also look behind him, there is a board on the wall, which is apparently a scripture in the Bible. I really hope this show does not go the religious route, but it does have something to do with what Tabitha apparently was talking about in the confession. It was very suspicious that he knew the gender of her baby without her telling him, and it was also very suspicious that he was so encouraging of her opening the lunchbox that she had yet to check that Victor had packed snacks for her in. I am wondering that maybe the father of Victor came to confess several times to that pastor in the church to let him know certain things, and he believes her story because he has heard it, possibly from Victor's dad. And with Victor's dad comes something that's very different for the first time in the show, a new layer that adds somebody from the outside world knowing possibly about FROMland and what goes on there, as well as that his son is possibly there still. I do think that from the previews of this season, we can tell that his father knows what's going on. The greater fan theory here is that Victor is actually manifesting all of FROMland from his inner childhood trauma and chooses to stay there when he knows that there's a way to get out and cannot interfere with people in FROMland's journeys because the monsters will come for him. Because if you notice, he doesn't seem to fear the monsters much. He actually ends up being very bold in this episode, even saving Jade from one of the monsters. And it makes me wonder if the monsters kind of just don't mess with him because they know that he has helped shape a part of their world. Now, speaking of world shaping, I do want to bring up these really creepy statues that Jim and Kenny found in the woods. Jim is starting to get on my nerves. Jim himself wasted Kenny's time when Kenny could have been there to protect his mother from the horrible events that took place. We will get back to the creepy statues in just a moment because they are very important in this episode, and there is an Easter egg that maybe you guys did not catch when they went into that village in the woods. I just want to say though that Kenny should not have been as good of a parent as Jim was supposed to be. Jim has let his ego control his entire decision making for the entirety of this series. Kenny is actually capable of helping people. Jim needs to be worrying about his own 2 children to the point where Kenny is now worrying about the Matthews children because he wants to make sure that the Matthews kids do not lose both parents in a week the way he has lost one of his parents. And now after this episode has lost both of his parents. What made me so frustrated about the storyline with Jim and Kenny in this part of the episode was that Jim changed his mind over and over again. Even after Boyd had explained so many things to him that were helpful in his journey into the forest, Jim just kept ignoring them over and over again. Then we get the monster outside of the cabin, which could be the same monster that dragged Sarah and Boyd's tent. It has become very clear to me that Jim wastes everyone's time, and Jim is not helpful to the greater good of the characters getting out of FROMland. If this show does relate the characters to tarot cards, I think Jim is the Joker, because he is nothing but a joke at this point. I cannot take him seriously. He should have realized what he realized late at night in the cabin way sooner. The moment that Kenny realized that these kids' fathers should not be going into the woods and risking it. Getting back to the creepy statues, did you guys notice that when they entered the village, There were a bunch of statues set up in a specific way, and they reminded me, yes, of the Blair Witch, but they also reminded me of something that already exists in this show. They heavily resemble the talisman, and I think some of the drawings that Victor has seen in the cave in the previous seasons. I don't have an exact photo of it at the moment, but it is very suspicious the way that those statues are set up at the entrance of the village. Let's move on to Tilly, because I do not trust her. And if you saw the new movie, The Watchers, with Dakota Fanning, do you remember the older lady in that movie and what ended up happening with her character? I think that that is the Tilly of From. I think that if the theory that the monsters are actually Celtic fairy demons, it could be that this woman is one of them that's able to walk amongst the daytime, able to influence and spy on Colony House. If you're wondering why I think she's suspicious, how is somebody that optimistic and happy in a situation like they are in? I also heavily believe that she is the one that poisoned the soil. Fatima is getting very, very sick, and while I do think that Elgin and her are connected somehow, I do want to point out that every time we see this ghost in the geisha kimono, she is like relating to water. Above the bathtub in last season with Elgin when he saw her for the first time, trying to drown him. And in this season, when she's walking towards him, you can see the water dripping from her hands. I'm wondering if that has to symbolize something with her baby and the amniotic fluid. Maybe it's something leading her to water. I don't know. I will make a Fatima Elgin theory video later on when I can, but yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about with those two. I cannot talk about Mama Chen's loss and the way I bawled my eyes out without talking about Father Khatri, because it gives me hope that we will see her again in this season and future seasons of the show. Boyd finally, for some reason, decides to ask these entities, "What are you?" and he doesn't get the best answer. It is good to know that there is a way for her to come back, either as a ghost that haunts Boyd and makes him feel more guilt, or as a good spirit that comes back to haunt her son to make sure that he is guided in the right way to be able to escape FROMland one day. The monsters look scarier than ever, and now that we know that they actually have intent, it makes them all the more sinister than just evil zombies roaming the woods trying to get people out of their houses at night. There is so much more I could talk about with this episode, but I just want to say we will miss her so much and that she did not deserve that at all.